lot to ask, but is there any way I can stay here for the night? He asked, and he was right. It was a lot. You can lock me in a room with only a mattress or something. I don't mind, he joked. I told him I didn't even know him, so he introduced himself as Enzo. I'm Diana, I said. I took him to my guest house. I had some clothes there that would fit him, so I let him take a shower and went back to the living room to watch my movie, but keeping my eye on the door of the guest house to make sure he didn't try to murder me. He came back a few minutes later, rubbing his hair with a towel. Some house you got here, he said. Reminds me of an old classmate of mine. She was a nerd, but now she's loaded. He then stopped and looked at me with wide eyes. Diana? He gasped. Then he started naming almost everyone I went to high school with, and that's when it hit me. The man in front of me went to my school. He was friends with the most popular guy, the one that made fun of me nonstop. When I pointed that out, Enzo's smile dropped, and he looked kind of sad. He sat down on my couch with me and apologized for himself and his friends. We talked for a while and shared the takeout I had ordered. Eventually, I thought to ask the question I should have asked as soon as he walked in through the door. So how'd you end up in the middle of nowhere? Was my question. He explained that he was on his way home from being abroad on a humanitarian mission on an island. He talked about how beautiful it was, how amazing it felt to help people, and how he wished more people did it. I hung on his every word. Something about that island sounded magical. The way he described it really made me want to go. That night, I tossed and turned. I couldn't sleep a wink. I finally got out of bed in the morning to the smell of waffles. Enzo had made himself comfortable in the kitchen. The second I sat down, I decisively said, I want you to take me to the island. He put a waffle in front of me and he talked about why I wanted to go, and I told him why. He thought wanting to help people was more than a good enough reason, so we made plans. 2 days later, I met him at the airport. I started walking in the direction of my private plane, but he grabbed my elbow and led me somewhere else. No way I'm getting on that, I said. He wanted me to hop on the rusty, tiny little plane. I was surprised one of the wings didn't fall off. You gotta, he said. It's the island's own plane. He convinced me by saying he had been on it many, many times. When we arrived, the landing was so rough I was surprised that my seatbelt didn't snap. Enzo had this old man pick us up from the tiny airport in a rusty old car. I was starting to see a pattern in everything that belonged to this island. When we got to the town where everyone lived, a whole bunch of people came running towards us. Enzo had people all over him, kids trying to get on his shoulders and old people trying to give him food. He then told them I was there to help out, and they all crowded me instead. I didn't appreciate the kids or the old people or their weird-looking food. They were all too touchy. I was getting claustrophobic, and I couldn't see a road not made of dirt anywhere. I tried to get help from Enzo with all these people, but he was off somewhere else talking to this little old lady. They seemed to be whispering gravely. She looked pretty serious. I managed to get the people to leave me alone, after which I went to Enzo and he took me to where I'd be staying. I'm gonna be honest with you, I was panicking. I had never been somewhere so poor. The young girl who wore torn clothes wasn't managed to get the people to leave me alone, after which I went to Enzo and he took me to where I'd be staying. I'm gonna be honest with you, I was panicking. I had never been somewhere so poor. The young girl who wore torn clothes wasn't in me anymore. I was used to a different lifestyle. Everything felt dirty. The food looked unappetizing. I was losing my mind. Enzo wasn't helping at all. He kept asking me where I got my money from, how I got so rich, and how much I'd be giving to the town. Now that we were here, all he talked about was money, and it was driving me nuts. I wish I never let you in my house, I finally snapped at him. We were in the little house we were staying at. Wow, I should have expected Miss Billionaire to not care about other people. You're so selfish. He snapped back. I demanded to know how I was selfish, which triggered a rant. He started going on about how the way I made money was selfish, that I was cheating and wasn't even willing to help those in need. Do you have any idea what it feels like to be in a place like this, knowing you're off in one of your mansions spending money left and right? I'm from here. This is my home. He screamed at me. He was so angry, he had turned red. God, all I wanted was for you to spend your big bucks on people who need it. Now I blew it. He sat down on a chair and rubbed his face. I stormed out of the house and went for a walk. I wanted to kick everything I saw. The roads were dirty, but I noticed there were no trash bins on them. I saw a few fishermen carrying only a few fish, but when I walked down to the marina, I noticed they only had one small boat, and their nets were all torn. I realized something. There was so much potential for the island. I ran back to the little cabin to talk to Enzo, but he was gone. He left a sarcastic note saying he'd hope I'd enjoy my time there. I crumpled it up and threw it elsewhere. I then climbed onto my roof to try to get a signal on my phone. When I did, I called my mom. Not a day later, she was there telling me off. My mom had shown up with her many trucks of luggage and employees. See, I had picked more humble attire for my trip here, but my mom heard island and decided to go all out. When we were alone, she sat me down and said, What is this about you wanting to sponsor this place? I explained that the island was great, full of hardworking people. My mom didn't believe it. We were arguing when there was a knock on my door. Some kids from the town came to deliver food. I thanked them and gave them some sweets I had bought, then turned at my mom with a beaming smile, but she just asked, "Are you really gonna eat that?" I yelled at her for being insensitive, but she just stormed out saying she needed some fresh air. I didn't want to talk to her, but then I felt bad that she was alone, and the clouds were looking pretty dark. I ended up running out the door to look for her. As I ran down a path looking for my mom, it started pouring rain, and the wind picked up. I was worried the trees were about to start tipping over when I heard a loud crash and a scream further down the path. I saw my mom almost fainting at the tree that must have fallen right in front of her. "Mom!" I screamed out. She ran towards me and we hugged. We were scared to move an inch to either side of the road when a little kid came from the bushes. He grabbed my hand and pulled me and my mom into the forest. He took us behind a small house. There was a sort of shed made of metal up against the mountain. He knocked on it and she just stormed out saying she needed some fresh air. I didn't want to talk to her, but then I felt bad that she was alone, and the clouds were looking pretty dark. I ended up running out the door to look for her. As I ran down a path looking for my mom, it started pouring rain, and the wind picked up. I was worried the trees were about to start tipping over when I heard a loud crash and a scream further down the path. I saw my mom almost fainting at the tree that must have fallen right in front of her. "Mom!" I screamed out. She ran towards me and we hugged. We were scared to move an inch to either side of the road when a little kid came from the bushes. He grabbed my hand and pulled me and my mom into the forest. He took us behind a small house. There was a sort of shed made of metal up against the mountain. He knocked on it and a little door opened. We stepped in and found at least 6 people in there. My mom was impressed by the shed. It actually felt safe. She asked who had built it and a woman stood up from the floor. She explained that a bunch of metal wound up on the beach and she used it to build this weatherproof shed for her and her kids. My mom was so impressed. She kept asking the woman questions while I played with the kids. As soon as the storm passed, we said thank you to our hosts and walked home while talking. "I think I see what you mean," started my mom. "These really are good people. I guess they were dealt a bad hand." "So you'll help me with them?" I asked, full of hope. "Yes, I think I will." She smiled at me. We sat in my living room for days after that, planning everything that we were going to do. A year passed. I left my mom at the house, taking forever to get ready as always, but I had been ready for hours. We were finally inaugurating the new marina. I had the docks redone and bought new boats for the fishermen, equipped with the best gear. I was walking down through the town when I saw a face I hadn't seen in a while. Enzo. He was standing wide-eyed on the now pavemented street. He had 2 suitcases with him. He then saw me and walked towards me, struggling with what to say. "What do you think?" I asked him. After a year, of course I wasn't angry anymore. "I made a few changes, but everyone seems happy," I said excitedly. I was proud of the place. The streets were now made of pavement. There were streetlights powered by windmills and trash cans everywhere to keep the streets clean. I had completely renovated the place. "I'm speechless," said Enzo. I took him by the elbow, the same way he did to me that day at the airport, and led him down to the marina. The sun was about to set. There was a large red ribbon separating the crowd from the sea. I was handed these huge scissors, which I cut the ribbon with, and everyone ran down to see the new boats. "I think I might stick around," Enzo said as we watched the crowd run around excited. "If you don't mind, of course." "Well, I definitely don't need your help with anything," I joked, "but I think I can find somewhere for you to stay," I said. We then stood in silence looking at the sunset. We were standing in a place that we both loved so much. I guess it was that feeling that made our hands inch closer and closer together until we were holding hands and staring off into the horizon.
"Derek, wake up! Do you know what day it is?" said Tina. "Ah," I said while wiping the sleep from my eyes. It was my little sister Tina, who had started a birthday countdown. Every morning she'd jump on my stomach to tell me how many days were left until her big day. 3 more days until my birthday! I'm so excited, Derek! I can't wait to open my presents. I know you'll get me something nice because you're the best big brother in the world!" she exclaimed. "Ah, my baby sister is gonna be 6 years old," I replied while ruffling her hair and giving her a hug. I was smiling, but I felt terrible. We're not a wealthy family. In fact, it's the complete opposite. My mom works at a little bakery, and my dad was recently laid off, so we have very little. I was given an allowance once in a while, but I never had much to spend on anything. I wish I could take my sister to the toy store and just let her pick out anything she wanted. She was my only sibling, and as an older brother, I was very protective. I wanted only the best for her, but I had nothing. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen to see what was for breakfast. Boring oatmeal porridge again. "Mom, I'm tired of this," I groaned. Honey, I'm tired of explaining to you that we can't afford to spend money on exciting breakfasts, she replied. Yes, son, you should be grateful that you at least have something to eat. Many people don't, my father said sternly. I sat down and ate quietly. It was true. While I didn't have much, there were still many who had less, and I guess I should be grateful. Yum, said Tina. She was adorable. She liked anything. After I finished breakfast, I took a shower and got ready for school. My parents chose to send me to a private school because they believed it was better. It was costing them an arm and a leg, but they decided our suffering would result in me landing a lucrative career, which would eventually make them proud. Anyway, it was good because at least I got to wear a uniform, so my classmates would never know that I only had 2 or 3 outfits. Still, it sucked to be the only poor person in the entire school. Almost everyone at that place lived in mansions and had practically everything. Then there was me, the guy with one uniform because my parents could only afford one. I wore the same one every day. That morning I was almost completely dressed when I realized I was missing a sock. I searched everywhere for it. It wasn't in the closet, on the chair near my desk, anywhere. My last resort was to check under the bed. As I knelt and peeped in the darkness, I noticed a crispy $50 bill on the floor next to an old shoebox. What? I thought. I've never been able to save that much my whole life, so where did this come from? I picked it up and without a second thought, I shoved it into my pocket. I was so excited that I ran out of the house and was just in time to catch the bus. Luckily, my pants were long enough to hide the fact that I was still missing a sock. My day was quite uncomfortable. Have you ever tried walking around with a missing sock? But I caught up with my best pal Miles at lunchtime. You're so irresponsible. Anyway, you're lucky my parents are strict and that all I have in my house are books and board games. Otherwise, we'd be in the same boat, I replied. One day that'll change. You're the smartest person in our year.